morning. I'm Captain Benjamin Scrivener from Staff Group 1 Delta. This presentation is for attribution. It's now my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, General Lloyd J. Austin III, retired. He's the former 12th U.S. Central Command Commander and currently is the member of the board of Nucor Steels Technology.
Well, good morning, everybody. That was kind of weak. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, sir. Okay, I was assured that everybody would be awake and very attentive, but I know that can't possibly be true because Major Dunham is a part of this class. Major Dunham, where are you? Not here? Okay. There she is. Stand up, Uni. No, really, stand up. Major Dunham was my XO when I served as a distinguished chair for leadership at West Point for the last 2 years. And she is a tremendous professional and very excited about being a part of this class. And Uni, I'm sorry to single you out like that, but you deserve that. So, well, good morning. It's wonderful to be here and to see everyone. And of course, I'm grateful for the opportunity to participate in this lecture series, which is named for one of my long-term mentors. General Powell is an extraordinary leader and simply a wonderful human being. And I think that we can all learn a tremendous amount from him. I know I have. Over the years, I've frequently called upon him or gone to see him to ask for his advice when dealing with challenging situations. And in every case, I've benefited enormously from his wise counsel and his example, and I still do. I also want to take a moment to thank the CGSC Foundation for making today's event possible. The foundation provides tremendous support to the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College in 3 big areas: scholarship, outreach, and support to soldiers and families. And I really cannot overstate the importance of that support and the impact of that support. So let's give everyone associated with the foundation a well-deserved round of applause. Again, I'm really thrilled to be here with you at the start of your year here at Fort Leavenworth, and I promise you that this will be a seminal experience. And if you don't want to take my word for it, in his autobiography, General and later President Dwight D. Eisenhower described his year here at CGSC as, quote, a watershed in my life. He viewed it as a transforming point in his career. And I truly believe that you will feel the same way when you look back on your time here going forward. Now, I recognize that that's saying a lot, given that most of you have already had some pretty remarkable experiences in your careers to date. It's worth noting that all of you were commissioned or embarked upon your careers in government after September 11th, 2001. And so this class was forged out of close to 2 decades of conflict, the longest period of conflict in our nation's history. And I know that many, if not most of you, have spent months or even years deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan and other places around the globe. And when you were home, you were usually preparing for your next deployment. And as company grade and junior field grade officers, you have contributed immeasurably to ensuring our success on today's battlefields. You've been out front, leading our men and women in combat. And you spent much of your time operating amid the local populaces and theater, building relationships, training military and police forces, and teaching and mentoring the people living and working in those countries. And through those experiences, you've gained remarkable skills. And again, I cannot exaggerate the long-term impact of your efforts already. You have contributed enormously to the defense of our nation and security around the world. And so you really, really have a lot to be proud of. And now you're preparing to embark upon the next phase of your lives and your careers. And going forward, many of you will serve in key staff positions, including as S3s and executive officers. And you'll run complex organizations and be responsible for large staffs. And you'll also hold very influential and important positions, advising senior leaders and key decision makers. And in doing so, you'll play a critical role in enabling and ensuring their success and ultimately the success of your units and your organizations. And so a tremendous amount of responsibility will rest on your shoulders. But you know, the good news is that captains and junior field grade officers and their civilian equivalents make stuff happen. You are the engine of our military and government organizations, and the decisions that you'll make, as well as the decisions made by individuals that you'll advise and influence, those decisions will continue to have a profound impact on the outcome of key operations and events. But no pressure. Ladies and gentlemen, our nation has been at war for close to 17 years now. And as a result, our military is better trained and more experienced and more capable than ever before. And your role in the days ahead will be to help us figure out how to take what is an exceptional force, albeit a somewhat tired force at this point, but how to take that exceptional force and make it even better. And I have every confidence that you'll do exactly that. But along the way, you'll face significant challenges. And unfortunately, as Albert Einstein once said, in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. And all of you are uniquely qualified to help your units and your organizations take advantage of those opportunities. The fact is that we've never had a better trained or more combat seasoned or capable officer corps than we do today. You are the gold standard. And understandably, a lot is expected of you. And while you're here at CGSC, I would encourage you to take the time to reflect back on all that you and your comrades have accomplished to date and internalize those key lessons learned and continue to prepare for the future and the challenges that lie ahead. And so, with this advice in mind, I thought I'd talk to you about three things today. First, the incredible evolution of our military over the last 4 decades. You know, with every significant challenge that we've faced, our military has demonstrated the ability to rapidly evolve and meet those challenges head on. Our military has never failed, not once, never failed the American people, and it never will. Second, what will our military need to focus on going forward? And finally, I'll close by sharing with you a few of the lessons that I've learned in my short 40-plus year career in uniform. I do want to say that I hung up my uniform for the last time a couple of years ago. And as a retired general officer, I can only speak about my experiences and how I see the world today. I have no plans on being an armchair quarterback, and thus I won't comment on any current operations. But I will tell you that I'm confident that we have the very best leaders managing the various fights around the world that we're engaged in, And I have every confidence that they will be successful. And I am very, very confident that they know what they're doing. So first, from a big picture perspective, I want to highlight just a few of the significant changes that have occurred over the years that could be described as transformational. 41 years of service allows you to experience a whole lot of change. And over 4+ decades, I watched our Army grow and adapt. And I witnessed firsthand the role that outstanding leadership can play during such transformative periods. I was commissioned a second lieutenant back in 1975, just as the Vietnam War was ending. And the vast majority of non-commissioned officers and many of the enlisted soldiers that I was responsible for had significant combat experience. They were seasoned veterans and experts at their craft. And I learned an enormous amount from them while also leading them. It's also worth noting that I joined the Army not long after the draft was eliminated, and we moved to an all-volunteer force. And this was a significant shift in our military and presented a number of hurdles that had to be overcome. But we overcame them. 2 years prior to that, in 1973, TRADOC, the United States Army Training and Doctrine Command, was established, and it was charged with overseeing the training of Army forces and the development of operational doctrine. Doctrine that included the Air-Land Battle Doctrine, which was published in 1982, which arguably, still today represents the Army's basic warfighting doctrine. And in the years following the establishment of TRADOC, we saw the development of the Army's Big Five program, designed to provide more modern weapons and vehicles to our warfighters. And those weapons and vehicles included the UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter, which replaced the Huey helicopter, the AH-64 attack helicopter, the M1 Abrams tank, the Bradley fighting vehicle, and the Patriot missile system. So all of these and the many, many others events and deployments of weapon systems and vehicles, all of this represents events that were transformational in nature. And they followed important periods of self-reflection by our Army and our national leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, over the past several decades, who we fight and where we fight has changed. And how we fight has also changed. We've gone from a contiguous, linear battlefield where our adversaries were well organized and wore uniforms to non-contiguous, non-linear battlefields that don't recognize national boundaries and often span entire regions, and where we regularly find ourselves up against a smorgasbord of enemy combatants, most with competing priorities and no uniforms, and frequently hiding among the civilian populations. The best example of this type of conflict is a conflict in Syria, where we see at least 3 different fights ongoing and a host of external actors stirring the pot in support of their individual priorities. As I mentioned, how we fight has also evolved significantly over the years. Certainly, the increased integration of special operations forces with conventional forces has been a game changer. And we've also witnessed an unprecedented increase in air-ground coordination. And I can tell you from firsthand experience that that coordination has proven absolutely critical in our most recent conflicts in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and Syria, where we've had far fewer U.S. forces on the ground, but we've been absolutely lethal. So looking ahead, who we fight, where we fight, and how we fight will continue to evolve. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but the world is likely to get even more complex, not less complex, in the coming years. And your job will be to help to determine what future transformations will need to be made to ensure that our Army and our military remain the very best in the world, always ready to respond when called upon to defend our nation and our interests around the globe. And so that brings me to my second topic, and that is the way ahead. What will you, along with our other national and military leaders, need to focus on going forward? Well, that question can easily be answered, at least in part, by watching or reading the news. Among the situations that routinely garner headlines are the ongoing conflicts and the turmoil that we see throughout the Middle East in places like Iraq and Syria and Yemen and Lebanon. We're also closely watching what's going on in North Korea and what that could potentially mean for North Korea's neighbors, including South Korea, Japan, and China. And then there's Russia, as well as a nuclear threat, potential nuclear threat posed by Iran. Now, I encourage everybody to get comfortable in your seats because it's going to take me a couple of hours to work through all the nuances associated with those things. Just kidding. I don't plan to go into too much depth on any of them, but I will mention them briefly in order to highlight the sheer complexity of the strategic environment for the foreseeable future. And I'll start with the Central Region, since that's where I spent much of the last 15 years traveling around and studying that fascinating part of the world, and quite frankly, fighting in that part of the world. And I know that most of you have spent a lot of time there as well. It is an area that's rich in history and culture and tradition. It's also one of the most strategically important regions, holding as much as 60% of the proven oil reserves in the world and plentiful natural gas reserves, which are critical to the global energy market. The region also lays claim to vital sea lines of communication, and those sea lines of communication are obviously used for international trade and commerce. But when things go badly there, as a result of fragile political transformations, or civil wars, or sectarianism, or ungoverned spaces, or what I typically refer to as underlying currents, when things go badly there, they affect not only that region, but the rest of the globe as well. And so, going forward, I believe that it's critical that we maintain an acceptable level of security and stability in that part of the world because of the potential impact of unrest on our vital national interests and those of our allies. At the same time, equally important are our efforts to combat the ideas that often incite extremism and other fanatical behavior around the globe. You know, there's a growing population which is frequently referred to as the youth bulge. And it's comprised of educated and unemployed or underemployed and disenfranchised individuals that are frustrated by their circumstances, and many of them are jaded. And they are ripe for recruitment by extremist elements. And so this remains a tough challenge, but one that I strongly believe merits our continued focus and collective efforts. Meanwhile, our Secretary of Defense, Secretary Mattis, and our Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Joe Dunford, have made it clear that Russia and China are the priority. And they're followed closely by North Korea and Iran. Now, these four countries are investing in nuclear and cyber and space and conventional capabilities. And ultimately, they want to limit one of our greatest military strengths, which is our ability to project power. No other nation on earth can project power like the United States of America. Additionally, these four countries would very much like to damage or weaken our international alliances. And so to this end, we're seeing Russia and China assert themselves in various ways. Russia in the Ukraine and Syria, and China in the South Pacific. Indeed, these four countries, Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran, are doing their very best to dominate key regions in Europe, in the Middle East, and the Pacific. And they're also developing advanced weapon systems in an effort to close their capability gaps with us and our partners. North Korea has been pursuing nuclear and ballistic missile capabilities with the stated intent of threatening the continental United States. And Iran is also developing ballistic missile capabilities and has been a destabilizing force in the central region for decades. And by the way, I think that it's fair to say that virtually every bad thing that you see happening in the Middle East has Iran's fingerprints on it. So broadly speaking, we're seeing shifts in the character of global competition between the U.S. and our competitors. And while we continue to be the world's sole superpower, our adversaries are pushing back. They are building capabilities. They're narrowing the gap between us and them, both in terms of technology and combat experience. And this especially holds true for nation states such as Russia and China. And so we have to keep a close eye on their activities and the influence they're wielding in other parts of the world. Take, for example, Russia's involvement in Syria. They like to say publicly that they've been helping us to fight the bad guys, the Islamic State. But the truth of the matter is, they were and are the bad guys. And by bolstering the Assad regime, they have contributed to the hundreds of thousands of innocent men, women, and children killed in that tragic ongoing conflict. Additionally, the tremendous instability caused by the fighting in Syria is having a devastating effect on neighboring countries, including Lebanon, Iraq, and Jordan. And unfortunately, this phenomena of external actors attempting to shape outcomes is becoming more and more prevalent around the globe. So simply stated, the threats that we face around the world today and likely for the foreseeable future are increasingly complex and interconnected, and they continue to rapidly evolve. And as leaders in these types of strategic environments, you must be prepared and able to effectively exercise disciplined initiative in the midst of chaos. You must be able to anticipate challenges, and you must be willing to meet those challenges head on. As TRADOC points out, there are no facts about the future. There are no facts about the future. So in order to anticipate challenges and plan and develop the right capabilities to enable the force to respond effectively to emerging threats, you have to make some assumptions. And so as we look towards the future, let's very quickly consider what just a few of those assumptions may be. As pointed out by TRADOC, assumption one, we can assume that we will continue to be contested in all domains: air, land, sea, space, and cyber. Assumption two, we can expect to encounter trans-regional, gray zone, and hybrid strategies presented by both regular and irregular forces and criminal elements, and terrorist organizations attacking our strengths and mitigating our weaknesses, mitigating our advantages. Assumption three, we can expect increased speed of human interaction. We can also expect to see rapid coevolution between competitors. You know, we've all been out there in the fight, and we've noticed that as we encountered an adversary, they learn from that encounter, they develop different tactics, techniques, and procedures. We do as well, and that continues to evolve. We can expect the speed of that coevolution to be increased significantly in the future. Assumption 4, we can expect increased lethality by virtue of ubiquitous sensors. And adversaries could restrict us to temporary windows of advantage with periods of physical and electronic isolation. And concealment will be difficult. And hiding from advanced sensors will require a dramatic reduction of heat, electromagnetic, and optical signatures. So needless to say, you're looking at an increasingly complex and competitive battle space going forward. And successfully navigating that battle space will require strong, innovative, and confident leadership. You know, as I was preparing for today's discussion, I couldn't help but think about our 32nd Army Chief of Staff, General Retired Gordon Sullivan, and his thoughts on this topic, which he shared with the Army back in the 1990s. General Sullivan cautioned that the Army would have to come to grips with a shifting strategic landscape that would force it to operate in conflicts that wouldn't easily fit in the categories of war or peace, but rather something in between, something less definable, something more complex, and all at the time of great technological change. General Sullivan further noted that conflict would demand the utmost mastery of the art and science of war by military leaders. And so that's what you must continually strive to achieve, and that is the mastery of the art and science of war. Your civilian leadership is counting on you to do that. Your country is counting on you to do that. And General Sullivan also emphasized that amidst all of this tremendous change, and especially the advancements in technology, we must never lose sight of the fact that the essential nature of the Army has remained constant since the very beginning of the Army. It is the soldier. Ladies and gentlemen, we may have, and in fact we do have, the very best equipment and the most advanced technology on the planet. But at the end of the day, it is our people that make us who we are. They, and not our technology or our state-of-the-art weapon systems, they are what make us the greatest fighting force that the world has ever known. So before opening it up to questions, I'd like to quickly share 5 or 6 of the most important lessons that I've learned in my short 41-year military career. And what I just said there is the first and the most important lesson. Again, never forget that your greatest assets and your primary responsibility are your people. Your job is to lead them and to take care of them, and to make sure that they have everything that they need to be successful. You know, back when I was a second lieutenant, I just completed Ranger School, and I was assigned to the 1st Battalion, 7th Infantry in Aschaffenburg, Germany. And like any new lieutenant, I was raring to go, and I knew everything. You know these guys. You just left company command and they showed up in your units. They knew everything, they were raring to go. They could solve any problem. Well, that was me. But one day my platoon sergeant pulled me aside and he said, "Hey, sir, let me give you a piece of advice." He said, "You should worry about one thing and one thing only." He said, "Take care of your soldiers and be out in front of them and lead them, and they will follow you anywhere. and they will do whatever you ask them to do. And together you will accomplish amazing things, important things on behalf of our Army and our country. You know, ladies and gentlemen, that advice from Sergeant First Class Fox Ballard proved time and again to be the most valuable advice that I ever received in my career. You see, Fox Ballard was absolutely right. If you take care of your people, and if you earn their respect, they will move mountains for you. Let me say that I fully appreciate who I'm talking to. And I fully appreciate the fact that all of you have been in this business for a while now. But you know, I believe that this lesson bears repeating. Because no matter what job you have, or what level of seniority you achieve in the years ahead, you must never lose sight of the fact that your people are what's most important. Take care of them, and they will amaze and inspire you each and every day, and they will refuse to allow you to fail. My second piece of advice, the one thing that will have the greatest influence on your life and on the impact that you'll have is the strength of your character. The character of every individual is a reflection of his or her values. And our values serve as guideposts in our lives. And that's why the Army values of loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. That's why they are the bedrock upon which this institution operates each and every day. You know, General Norman Schwarzkopf once said that leadership is a potent combination of strategy and character. But if you must be without one, be without the character. And you know, I absolutely agree with General Schwarzkopf. Character is the foundation of good leadership. And sometimes, as most of you have probably already experienced, you'll have to make decisions that are unpopular, or decisions that involve the lives of people. And in those moments, you'll need to rely on your values and the strength of your character to ensure that you do what's right, even when the choice is a difficult one. Indeed, especially when the choice is a difficult one. My third piece of advice, and this is related to character, has to do with ethics, or the moral principles that govern our behavior. Ours is a 7-day-a-week, 24-hour-a-day job, and how we conduct ourselves, whether on duty or off duty, stateside or deployed, is a direct reflection of your profession. This means that the actions that we take in our personal lives and our relationships with other people, and the actions that we take in combat and how we conduct operations, all of those actions matter, and all of those actions have consequences. And not just for the individual, but for the organization as a whole. And so if people begin to question our behavior, then they begin to lose trust in our institution. And trust is something that you have to work on each and every day. You've got to build trust, you've got to nurture it. You cannot surge trust in a crisis. My fourth piece of advice is to never forget that ours is a team sport. And I'm here to tell you that at no other time in your career will this be more clearly demonstrated than your years as a field grade officer. We all know that there are very few opportunities to command as a major. And so you can't simply go out and direct actions and expect to be effective. To be successful, you'll need to be able to work together with others, and especially your peers. And not just the folks in your service, but across the joint community and the interagency and beyond. You know, my old high school football coach Coach Jim Hughes. Now, Coach Hughes taught me more about leadership than I can imagine, but I mean, it was early on in life, and Coach Hughes was a wise man, but a very tough man. He reminded me and my teammates routinely that football is not an individual sport. And you don't win games because of the accomplishments of an individual or a single player, even if that player is a great player. You win games when every player plays his or her position and does a good job at playing that position. And that person and those people are focused on the team's success. You know, that same lesson applies in our business. In everything that we do, on any battlefield, against any adversaries, we succeed or fail, we win or lose as a team. And if we have people or individuals that believe they won the war by themselves, let me just remind you that that's probably not true. Your team caused you to be successful. And related to this point, one of the things that I think is most beneficial about this experience here at CGSC is that there are students representing both the military and other government agencies and organizations, as well as the international community. And it's important to engage and to listen to one another's perspectives, because that's how we'll continue to fight and to conduct operations for the foreseeable future. In joint and interagency and intergovernmental and multinational environments. And you know, the fact is, the missions that we support are not just the military's responsibility or the State Department's responsibility, or even in some cases, America's responsibility alone. As former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger once said, peace cannot be achieved by one man or one nation. It results from the efforts of men of broad vision and goodwill throughout the world, end of quote. And so we must work together and contribute our unique skills and experiences to achieving common goals and objectives. And to do this, I would encourage all of you to take advantage of this opportunity to forge strong relationships with your classmates, including those from other services and agencies and organizations and the international community. And I promise you that those relationships will prove invaluable over the years. And you'll frequently call upon one another to help each other. You'll reach out for advice and support facing tough challenges or tough sets. And you should always be willing to help your comrades do whatever they need to do and to help them succeed. Another thing that I learned as I got more and more senior, and as I reached the senior ranks, there were no simple problems crawling in my door on a daily basis. Every problem that walked in the door was a thorny problem, difficult and complex. No, they didn't have clear-cut or easy solutions. And the problems that your generation will be called upon to solve in the future will be even more complex, by orders of magnitude. And so working through them will take time. And there'll be naysayers and folks who criticize your approach or the decisions that you make or the decisions that are made by the people that you advise. And as leaders, you'll need to rely on what you've learned and your ability to work through tough issues and challenges. But my advice to you is be confident, not arrogant, confident. And trust your judgment and trust the people around you. And by the way, when you are in a position to advise senior leaders, if you're asked for your advice, don't be afraid to be candid. And as people often like to say, speak truth to power. But in doing so, always take care to be respectful. And please don't mistake confidence and the courage that it can take to speak up and promote a differing viewpoint. Don't mistake that confidence and courage for rebelliousness. That's not what we're looking for. And finally, my last piece of advice would be to encourage you to make the most of your time here at CGSC. It is a time for professional and self-development and relationship building. But it's also an opportunity to spend some quality time with your families after running full speed for several years. The academic work here is very, very important. Let me state that up front for the record. But having said that, I can assure you that the workload is manageable and it will allow you some much-deserved time to re-energize and be home and present in a way that many of you probably haven't been for a big chunk of your careers, given the deployments and the tough assignments that you've had over the years. So make the most of it and spend some time with your spouses and kids, because once this year is over, you'll get back on that train, and that train is likely to be moving at a high rate of speed. As we all know, the train is now nuclear powered, so it doesn't even stop for fuel anymore. So to wrap it up, we've seen enormous change in our military and the world around us over the past 4 decades. And we can expect to see more change in the years to come. We've also seen remarkable transformations over the years, and those transformations have ultimately made our forces more capable, more lethal, and better prepared to respond when called upon to defend our nation and our interests around the globe. As leaders going forward, you will be required to anticipate the next set of challenges and to develop and implement solutions to address those challenges effectively. Again, the good news is that we have the most advanced technology and the best weapon systems in the world. We have the greatest fighting force in the world and the greatest diplomatic corps that the world has ever seen. As I said before, we have never had a better trained and more combat seasoned and capable officer corps than we have today. You are the gold standard. And I have every confidence that you will continue to do an exceptional job in the years ahead, no matter what the challenges are going forward. I want each and every one of you to know that I, along with every other senior military official in our mix here, we are all very proud of you, and I'm particularly grateful for the opportunity to spend a little time here with you this morning. And for the record, and I know you've heard this before, but I sincerely mean this, I would gladly trade places with any one of you in a heartbeat. Please be sure to thank your families on my behalf for their service and their sacrifice in what they have done and what I know they'll continue to do in support of our military. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to transition and be happy to take a couple of questions. Thank you very much.
Sir, as our support team enters the room, I'm going to give you your first question. As we enter this age of the multi-domain battlefield, what do you think our relationship with our civilian sister agencies and international brothers and sisters, will those relationships fundamentally change going into the future?
I think our relationships with our civilian agencies have continued to evolve. And clearly, as we begin to fight in the cyber domain, there are folks wearing neckties who understand the ones and zeros a lot more than many folks in the military. And so the body of expertise in that field is in the civilian community. I think we're going to have to embrace the community even more than we do now, share ideas, get their help and support in making sure that we understand the emerging threats and that we have the tools to be able to counter those threats. But to answer your question, I think it will call for increased cooperation and interaction.
Number 2.
Good morning, sir. E.J. Mason from 19 Delta. You mentioned the real threat from Russia and China. focusing on Russia. I agree with what you're saying, but the signaling out of Washington and out of the State Department, and even from the American public, really doesn't take the threat of Russia the same as we do in the military. ISIS is a clear threat. That's we're very focused on that. As a senior leader, how did you keep your head on target and above the clutter and still make the decisions that you needed to do? Because we know the money comes from Washington. The rigor that we're talking about for Russia and ISIS just didn't seem the same. Got any advice on that?
Yeah, so two things, and thanks for the question. I truly believe that there are many people in Washington who recognize the threat that Russia presents. You know, you've heard that from a number of senior officials and how concerned they are. You've heard of the concern on the part of Congress, you know, with respect to the Russians. And so, you know, I think that most people are clear-eyed about the potential threat here. And in terms of how how a senior military leader keeps focused, well, you know, you have a set of responsibilities to focus on, and you have goals and objectives that need to be accomplished, and you have to, you know, really stay focused on those goals and objectives. But you also need resources to accomplish those things. So you have to interact with Congress, you have to interact with the senior leadership to get those resources. You know, you as a combatant commander, you know, I was in many cases the military person representing the United States of America in the Middle East and South and Central Asia. And you know, I was very thoughtful about you know, my approach to things and what we tried to do and what we tried to accomplish. I wanted to help our allies build capability so that they could help us help them, you know, protect themselves and maintain peace and stability. But if you're focused on your goals and objectives that have been set out for you, military goals and objectives, and you're focused on the people in those organizations and the people that you're trying to help, it's not difficult to remain centered, to remain focused. But thanks for the question. Next question, please. Sir.
Number 2.
Hey, sir. Captain Manatsakanian from Section 7C. Thank you very much for coming and speaking with us today. My question's pretty short. What would you say is the greatest lesson learned from our experiences in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria as today? And then what do we risk forgetting as we move to readiness for large-scale combat operations?
Well, there are a lot of lessons learned, and you know, to really name the top lesson, I guess, or most important lesson is very difficult. I'll just give you a couple of thoughts. I think we know that that what we want to do is to help our allies to build capability and capacity on their own, so that they have the ability to deny ungoverned spaces to elements like the Islamic State or Al-Qaeda. And so everything that we can do to help them develop their own capabilities means that, you know, we don't have to necessarily deploy U.S. Soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines to a constant set of crises around the globe. So we want to do that. Another thing that we've learned is that presence buys you influence. And so if you are forward deployed with some elements and you're there, you know, interacting with the people, the leaders in the country, helping them to do what they want to do to protect themselves and build capability, that buys you a voice in a lot of things. We clearly learned that in Iraq, and hopefully we'll stay engaged with Iraq for the foreseeable future. That will not be easy, but hopefully we'll do that. Next question, please.
Number 1, please. Number 1.
Yeah, so the question is, as we look back on airland battle and we look at ourselves today, as we, begin to hone our skills to be able to fight in multiple domains, what lessons that we learned then that are appropriate to the next battlefield? Well, it's very interesting. We have enjoyed air superiority thanks to our great airmen. I know we got many airmen in the crowd today, but and thanks for being here. Thanks for volunteering to come and spend a year with soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. But we have enjoyed air superiority in everything that we've done. Over the last 17 years that we've been in conflict, we've never really worried about an adversary dropping a bomb on us. Going forward, as we look at near-peer competitors, Russia, China, that's something that we got to think about. And as I mentioned, we also have to think about the fact that they are closing the gap in terms of capability. And so we'll see a proliferation of sensors that we haven't even thought about right now. We'll see a contested airspace. We'll see challenges in areas that we've not seen before. And so we saw that as we developed the airland battle. We were dealing with those kind of issues. I think we're going to be called to deal with them again as we look at taking on near-peer competitors, air, sea, and land. So,
Number 2, please.
Sir, good morning. Captain Jeff Duvall Fetters, Staff Group 10A. How did you apply your combat lessons learned from your soldiers in Vietnam, as you talked about, to your strategic plan in Iraq and Afghanistan when these fights shifted to a counterinsurgency fight?
The greatest thing I learned early on was to develop the ability to listen to my subordinates. Now, everything that that your subordinates say won't absolutely be 100% correct, but listening to them and taking on their advice in most cases, I think, is of value, and then being able to incorporate that advice into your plans and operations. Well, fast forward as I became more senior, I learned that listening to my subordinate commanders, the brigade commanders when I was a division commander, and then certainly as a corps commander, being able to, intently listen to my division commanders and understand, see things through their eyes, made me a much more effective corps commander. And I learned there as well that I needed to give my subordinates the responsibility and give them a long enough leash to get their jobs done. And so, creating an environment where they felt comfortable that they could make decisions, exercise initiative, is something that proved beneficial for me. And I really learned those lessons very early on in my career, but they proved beneficial to me, throughout my entire career. So, next question, please.
Number 3.
Sir Ryan Hodgson, Group 17 Alpha. From your time in command at CENTCOM while leading operations in Afghanistan and Iraq, what would you say you did most significantly to counter Iran? And what is one thing, maybe looking back on it now, you would have liked to have done differently?
Could you repeat your question? I'm sorry, I didn't.
Sir, it's just acknowledging that there were a lot of simultaneous operations going on while you were in charge of CENTCOM, both in Iraq, Afghanistan. But what is one thing that you think you did most successfully to counter Iran? And then what's one thing that you would have liked to have done differently?
Well, I'm not sure that we ever did successfully counter Iran. There was, for a number of reasons, I hold Iran responsible for the deaths of a lot of our troops there through the employment of improvised explosive devices. You guys remember the EFPs that were just absolutely horrible, the explosively formed penetrators that we saw in in Iraq. Some of you may not, may have been a bit early for you to be exposed to that, but Iran was resourcing that effort, and of course, through the Shia militia, they employed those weapon systems and tried everything they could to prevent us from being successful. I think we did a fairly good job of containing their aggression and punching back tactically while where we could. But I think I hesitate to say that we were anywhere close to being absolutely successful against Iran, because they're still up to their mischief. When I was a CENTCOM commander, Iran captured a couple of our sailors there for a brief period of time. And the one thing that I would have liked to have done a little bit differently is gone after those guys in a much more forceful way at that point in time. But I recognized that in doing that, I would have caused things to escalate to a point where we could have been in a full-blown shooting war, and that was not to the benefit of those sailors or to the benefit of our country at that point in time. And again, these are really difficult problems that you'll have to kind of work your way through when you become a senior leader. Even before that, you'll be advising senior leaders on what to do and what not to do, and you'll be part of that assessment process. That the time period that you'll have to make those assessments is very compressed, but you'll have to advise senior leaders on what to do. And by the way, you're probably not going to believe this, but it's absolutely true. I had a commander's action group that had several, probably 7 or 8 officers in it. There were a couple of lieutenant colonels and a couple of colonels and some majors. And some of those majors were fresh out of SAMs, and they were really good. And we developed a relationship where those majors could sit down and say to me, "Hey, sir, I really believe this, this, and this." And again, going back to that earlier lesson, this person that was far junior to me, I, as a senior leader, I, as a 4-star officer, listened intently to what they were saying. And of course, I would weigh that out, weigh whatever the input out with my experiences and the other things that I was getting from other sources. But my message to you is that, as a major or very early on in your career, you could have the opportunity to be a key player in some critical decision making. So don't take what you're going to learn here and what you're going to do here in terms of working through scenarios and drilling on doctrine and the military art and science. Don't take this lightly, because it's absolutely important. And those senior leaders are counting on you to come out informed and developed and willing to respectfully provide that input to them. Next question, please.
Number 1, please.
Good morning, sir. Major Ngozi Collins from Staff Group 8 Bravo. Thanks again for coming today. With regards to SecDefs 2+3, specifically China, Russia, and the VEOs, I didn't hear mention of PRC in key African countries extending their deep water port capabilities. What are your thoughts on growing our strategic relationship within that AOR in order to counterbalance not only PRC, but Russia's foothold in Libya, as well as the VEOs operating in and throughout the AFRICOM AOR? Over.
Yeah, I think great question, by the way. I think you did hear me say that that we have to be mindful of what China is doing, and the fact that China is developing anti-access aerial denial capability that would limit our ability to project combat power. China has been focused on Africa for some time for a number of reasons: natural resources, strategic positioning, that sort of stuff. I think it's important to keep an eye on what they're doing, and I also know that when we make decisions on what we're going to do with our resources, with our military, we have to keep in mind our vital national interests, and we have to weigh out whether or not we have a significant interest in that particular piece of the world, which I think we do. But as we weigh that out with the other things, against the other things that we're involved in, we have to make some decisions. We can't be everywhere all the time. So in some cases, we got to monitor and develop the plans and the capability to be able to counter something when it arises. But we only have so many resources, and we can't position them or sprinkle them all over the world. We have to prioritize what's most important to, what's important next. So.
Number 2, please.
Sir, Captain Ryan Rothschild, Staff Group 5 Charlie, good morning. My question is, in your opinion, what are the most significant gaps in our Army's strategic knowledge in the CENTCOM AO that would benefit from more research?
What are the strategic gaps in the CENTCOM AO? I think, again, this kind of dovetails to the question that we were just, the subject we were just talking about, prioritization of resources. As you look at what the priorities are as laid out by the national leadership here, we really have to do some things to widen the gap between us and our near peer competitors, if possible. We have had, the advantage for so long over Russia and China, but while we've been engaged in a fight for the last 17 years in Iraq and Afghanistan, they've been busy building capabilities and narrowing that gap. So we're losing that edge that we had. Now, as we began to develop, to focus on those countries a bit more, and to position resources to be able to counter some of the things that could happen, then there's only so many resources. So some of those resources began to leave the central region, to leave the CENTCOM area, so that we can apply more resources to the Pacific or to Europe. And as we do that, again, we have less capability in the Middle East. What I worried about frequently was the number of surface combatants that we had available to us in the CENTCOM AOR. I also worried about the amount of aircraft that we had available. And remember now that when I was a CENTCOM commander, we were always, at all times, fighting at least one major war, and that was Afghanistan. We had drawn down and moved out of Iraq, and you'll recall I was the guy that brought us out of Iraq, which was to the credit of your teammates, the folks who got us out, who did all the logistical heavy lifting to move those mountains to get us out. We did a good job of that, but we probably should have kept a presence there. But nonetheless, we're always fighting at least one major war in the CENTCOM AOR. And I was always concerned about the amount of air and the amount of surface combatants that I had available to us to do that. And as the fight against the Islamic State began to kind of materialize, I certainly felt that I didn't have the air resources and the naval resources to handle that emerging fight. So I asked for more, and I got them. But right now, I would say the strategic gap, is probably in the area of surface combatants and maybe in the area of air power as well. But I don't want to speak for the CENTCOM commander. The current CENTCOM commander, he is a person that's in the best seat to be able to make those determinations. And Joe Votel is a great officer, and I don't want to do his business for him. But if I'm just looking from afar, I would say that those would be the things that I would be concerned about right now.
Number 2, please.
Good morning, sir. I am Lieutenant Colonel Ayman from Egypt, Group 14 Delta. Thank you for coming and give us all this experience. And I have a good question about ISIS. We made focus about ISIS in Libya, in Iraq, and Syria, but we forget Libya. and they already moved from Iraq and Syria and moved and settled in Libya. So what is the best solution for Libya at this time? So we can give them weapons or send forces to kill ISIS in Libya at this time.
Well, I won't pretend to know what the best solution to counter the Islamic State in Libya is. I will say that we know, and I've worked with your president, President El-Sisi, when he was head of the military, and certainly we remained friends throughout the years. And I know that he's always been concerned about what's going on his border and what's happening in Libya. And he's right, that is ungoverned space in most cases. And we know that elements like the Islamic State will move to those ungoverned spaces if given the opportunity. So they're looking for ungoverned spaces. They're also looking for resources to support their effort. And so Libya has both of those. They have oil and they have weak government or no government in most cases. So I think what we have to do is to remain vigilant. We have to continue to work as a coalition with along with our allies to try to keep pressure on this element and to deny them the ungoverned spaces and to deny them the resources that they'll need to be successful. But this is not over by no stretch of the imagination. It's not over in Syria, and it's not over in the region for some time. But it's going to take all of us working together, and we got to not only do the things to counter the physical threat, we have to take away, or we have to counter the ideas that give rise to things like the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda.
Number 2, please.
Sir, I'm Major Daly from 19 Delta. As you mentioned before that Russia, China increased their domain in Pacific region. And there is no fact about the future, as you said. Then we have assumption that we will continue our army domain. So my question is, based on U.S. strategy about pivot to Asia, so what do you think increasing military presence in Pacific region is better option to rebalancing power in the Pacific area when China use different approach such economy to influence that region? Thank you.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that last part of your question there again?
My question is, based on U.S. strategy pivot to Asia, so what do you think increasing military presence in Pacific is better option to rebalance power in Pacific region when China use different approach, such economy approach? Thank you.
Well, I think as we see China continue to develop various capabilities, and we continue to see China do what it's doing in terms of claiming territory in the South China Sea, I think we have to anticipate that, what could happen in the future. And so in order to be ready to deal with anything that could happen, we need to position capability and forces to be able to respond rapidly. And we also have North Korea in that region, and certainly the threats that North Korea has presented us has caused us to lean forward and want to be more ready to respond in the event that this very interesting leader makes a mistake, and a mistake of judgment. So yeah, I think we have to do what we're doing and increase the capabilities that we have deployed in that region. And certainly, China wants to be, we are the world's superpower. The United States of America is the world's superpower. China wants to be the world's superpower eventually, and they believe that they will be, in my view. They have a long-term approach to things. They'll use a combination of diplomacy, influence, and developing and they will develop capabilities to give them additional military power. But again, I think we have to stay ahead of that. We got to make sure that they don't close that gap. And I do think that our positioning of forces in the region, or increasing our capability in the region, is the right thing to do.
Sir, we have time for one more question.
Okay?
I'm going to go with number 2.
Sir, Captain Szymanski, Staff Group 14 Bravo. Given your comments from General Sullivan, what do you think we need to prioritize, either doctrinally or maybe legislatively, to operate in that space between war and peace, or as General Lundy put it, left of armed conflict?
What do we need to prioritize and be able to operate, in order to be able to operate in that space between?
We are either in the kind of the doctrinal space or legislatively.
I think we need to recognize that that in order to do all the things that we need to do, our forces need to have capability, increased capability in areas like the ability to acquire and process intelligence. We need linguists so that we can engage people in different countries. We need to be able to educate our officers so that they understand different cultures, so that they can be effective in those cultures. And of course, the military has to be of a certain size to be able to do all the things that we're asking it to do. It's got to have the money to put to train people that we need to train. It's got to have the modern platforms to be effective if we have to go to a high-end type of conflict. So this is something that your leadership continues to work on. I know General Milley very well. He and I served together a couple of times in the past, and I have every confidence that he understands the challenges ahead, and he is going after those resources that you'll need to be effective. I also know General Dunford very well. General Dunford and I were very close as he was a commander in Afghanistan and I was a CENTCOM commander. So I know how he thinks, what he thinks is important, and trust me that he is going after the right things, and he is asking for the right resources to ensure that you remain effective, not just today, but for the foreseeable future. And again, you have a very, very challenging future ahead of you. But just laying eyes on you and hearing your questions, and knowing, as I know some of you from previous life before, you will be enormously successful. But it won't get any easier. It will get become more and more complex and challenging. And I wish you all the very best of luck. And I think that's the last question, or do we have another one? So again, don't forget to thank your families on my behalf. They are doing great things in support of you and our country, and they deserve some credit. God bless each and every one of you. Thanks.